There is a conversation that happens in North San Diego County gardens with such regularity that it has become almost a regional tradition. A gardener stands in their yard in July, looking at a drip system running for the third time that week, watching the leaves on their fruit plants curl at the edges from heat stress, calculating in their head how much water they have spent trying to keep plants alive that were never designed to survive what the inland foothill climate delivers between June and October. And they say some version of the same thing. This climate is just too difficult for serious fruit production. It is too hot, it is too dry, the soil is too poor, the Santa Ana winds are too destructive. And the frosts that come in January at 1,300 feet are too unpredictable to risk anything truly valuable. And then they go back inside and order more plants from a catalogue that was written for a different climate entirely. Because every mainstream fruit gardening resource available in English was written for one of three climates: the cool, moist maritime climate of the Pacific Northwest and the British Isles, the humid continental climate of the American Midwest and Northeast, or the temperate, four-season climate of Western Europe. None of these resources was written for the inland foothill climate of Southern California. None of them accounts for the specific combination of conditions that defines gardening at 1,300 feet in North San Diego County. The long, dry, hot summers with humidity that drops to single digits during Santa Ana events. The mild but genuinely frosty winters that can deliver 28 degrees Fahrenheit on the January night and 70 degrees Fahrenheit the following afternoon. The alkaline, rocky, fast-draining soils that defeat acid-loving plants without significant amendment. The near-total absence of summer rainfall that makes every drop of irrigation water a resource to be managed carefully. And the extraordinary Mediterranean light, more than 300 days of sunshine per year, that pushes photosynthesis and sugar production in ways that cloudy northern climates can never match. This specific combination of conditions is not a collection of obstacles to be overcome. It is a precise climate description that matches the native growing environment of some of the most productive, most flavorful, and most nutritionally valuable fruit-producing plants in the world. Because the inland foothill climate of North San Diego County is, in its essential structure, a Mediterranean climate, and the Mediterranean basin, the California chaparral, the Chilean matorral, the South African fynbos, and the southwestern Australian quangon are the 5 Mediterranean climate zones on Earth, and they are home to more edible plant species per square kilometre than almost any other biome on the planet. The plants that evolved in these zones did not evolve despite the heat and drought and rocky alkaline soils. They evolved because of them. They developed deep root systems to find water in dry summers. They developed waxy or silvery or aromatic leaves to reduce water loss in low humidity. They developed the ability to fruit prolifically on minimal water once established because in their native environment, reliable irrigation was never a given. When you plant these plants in a North San Diego garden at 1,300 feet, something happens that never happens when you plant a Pacific Northwest blueberry in the same position, or a Georgia muscadine in the same soil. The plant recognizes where it is, not in any mystical sense, but in the entirely practical sense that every growing condition it encounters, the soil chemistry, the rainfall pattern, the temperature swings, the humidity levels, the light intensity, matches what its root system and leaf structure and fruiting biology evolved to handle. And the result is a plant that does not need you the way a mismatched plant needs you. It does not need daily irrigation after the first year. It does not need soil amendment to correct a pH that was wrong from the beginning. It does not need protection from the conditions that define your climate because those conditions are its native conditions. These are the 12 fruit bushes that were built for the hot, dry, rocky, sun-drenched, frost-touched, Santa Ana blasted inland foothills of North San Diego County. And if you are gardening in this climate and spending significant time and water keeping the wrong plants alive, this list is going to change how you think about your garden entirely. Number 1 is the pomegranate Punica granatum, and there is no more perfectly designed plant for the North San Diego foothill climate than this one. The pomegranate is native to the region stretching from Iran through Afghanistan and into northwestern India, a zone characterized by hot, dry summers, mild winters with occasional frost, rocky alkaline soils, and almost no summer rainfall. Read that description again, and then look out at your North San Diego garden, because that is exactly what you have. The pomegranate did not just adapt to these conditions over evolutionary time. It thrived in them. It became one of the defining food plants of human civilization in these conditions. Because it produces abundantly where almost nothing else will, stores its fruit on the bush through autumn without requiring refrigeration or immediate harvest, and asks almost nothing in return beyond the summer sun and the well-drained rocky soil that your garden provides naturally. A mature pomegranate in a North San Diego foothill garden is a revelation if you have only ever seen the fruit in a grocery store. The fruit is dramatically better than anything commercially available because commercial pomegranate production in California prioritizes shipping durability and uniform appearance over flavor. A homegrown pomegranate left on the bush until it is genuinely ripe, which means until the skin has begun to crack slightly and the arils inside have developed their full sugar content, has a flavor complexity that stops you mid-bite. Sweet and tart and floral and rich simultaneously, with the deep red juice that stains everything it touches and that contains one of the highest concentrations of antioxidants of any fruit food in the world. For the North San Diego foothills, at 1,300 feet, variety selection matters because you are at the cold edge of reliable pomegranate country. Wonderful is the standard California commercial variety, and it performs well in the warmer, lower portions of the inland foothill zone, where winter temperatures rarely drop below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But at 1,300 feet, where January nights can reach the upper 20s, the cold hardy varieties offer significantly better insurance. Salavatsky, developed in the cool winter regions of Russia and Central Asia, handles temperatures down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit without significant damage and produces large, sweet, pale-seeded fruit that many growers consider superior in flavor to Wonderful. Nikitsky Rani is an early ripening variety developed in Ukraine that finishes its fruit development before the first autumn frosts, which is a meaningful advantage in the shorter effective summer of the higher foothill elevations. And Granada is a California-bred variety that ripens earlier than Wonderful and produces reliably even in years when an early frost interrupts the late-season ripening window. Plant pomegranates in your hottest, most sun-exposed position in full sun in any well-drained soil. They handle the alkaline conditions of North San Diego foothill soils without any amendment. Water deeply but infrequently during the first 2 summers to establish the root system, then reduce irrigation dramatically. A mature, established pomegranate in the North San Diego foothills needs one deep watering every 2 to 3 weeks in summer, at most. And in years with a good winter rainy season, it may need almost no supplemental irrigation at all. A single mature bush produces 20 to 30 pounds of fruit per year for decades, potentially for a century, with virtually no ongoing care beyond occasional pruning to maintain size and shape. Number 2 is the fig Ficus carica. Unlike the pomegranate, the fig is a plant whose native climate is a near-perfect match for the North San Diego foothill environment. The fig is native to Western Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean, a region of hot, dry summers, mild winters, and thin, rocky alkaline soils. It evolved to store water in its large leaves and thick stems, to fruit prolifically on minimal rainfall, and to tolerate the kind of summer heat that shuts down less adapted plants. At 1,300 feet in North San Diego County, the fig finds conditions close enough to its native environment that it grows with a vigor and produces with an abundance that consistently surprises gardeners who have tried to grow it in cooler, moister climates and found it marginal. The North San Diego foothill climate gives the fig 2 things that cooler California coastal climates and most of the rest of the country cannot reliably provide: heat and a long season. Figs need accumulated heat units to ripen their fruit fully, and the inland foothill summer, with its consistent daytime temperatures of 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit through July, August, and September, delivers those heat units more reliably than the coastal fog belt ever will. And the long warm autumn that follows the North San Diego summer gives the main crop time to ripen fully before the first frost arrives in November or December at this elevation. Brown turkey is the most cold-hardy and reliable variety for the foothill zone and handles the occasional hard frost without significant wood damage. Celeste is a smaller fruited but exceptionally sweet variety that ripens early enough to avoid frost risk even in higher elevation positions. Black Mission, the classic California fig, produces abundantly in the hottest, most sheltered positions in the foothill garden and delivers the intensely sweet, deeply flavored fruit that makes the fig one of the great fruit experiences of the Mediterranean world. A mature fig in a North San Diego foothill garden needs almost no irrigation once established, tolerates the alkaline rocky soils without amendment, and produces 2 crops per year in most seasons, the Breba crop in June and July, and the main crop from August through October. Number 3 is the olive Olea europaea, and while most gardeners think of the olive primarily as an ornamental or culinary oil tree rather than a fruit bush, certain compact varieties can be managed as productive multi-stemmed fruit shrubs in the garden context. And the olive belongs on this list because no plant is more specifically and completely adapted to the North San Diego foothill climate than this one. The olive evolved in the Mediterranean basin over thousands of years in conditions that are climatically almost identical to the inland California foothill zone. Hot, dry summers, mild but frosty winters, rocky, alkaline, well-drained soils, minimal summer rainfall, intense sunlight. The olive did not adapt to these conditions. It was shaped by them over millennia of natural selection until it became arguably the most perfectly drought-adapted productive food plant in the temperate world. An established olive in a North San Diego foothill garden at 1,300 feet needs essentially no supplemental irrigation after the first 2 years. Its root system goes deep, finding moisture in the rocky subsoil that annual plants and shallow-rooted perennials cannot access. It tolerates the alkaline pH of foothill soils without any amendment. It handles the Santa Ana winds that can strip moisture from plant tissue within hours because its small, waxy silver-gray leaves evolved specifically to minimize water loss in exactly this kind of desiccating wind event. And it handles the January frosts at 1,300 feet without any damage, because most olive varieties handle temperatures down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, once established, which covers the coldest nights the North San Diego foothills typically deliver. For fruit production rather than ornamental use, Arbequina is the best variety for the foothill zone because it is self-fertile, compact enough to manage without heavy annual pruning, cold-hardy to the foothill elevation, and produces small, intensely flavored olives in abundance. Curing your own olives from a backyard Arbequina tree is one of the most satisfying food production experiences a North San Diego foothill gardener can have. Producing something that bears no resemblance to the canned olives on a grocery store shelf and that cost nothing beyond the initial investment in the plant. Number 4 is the jujube, Ziziphus jujuba, which I also covered in the hot climate script for its heat and drought tolerance, but which belongs with even greater force on the North San Diego foothill list, because the jujube is native to the exact climate type you are gardening in. The Chinese jujube evolved in the semi-arid hot summer, cold winter regions of northern China and Central Asia, environments with Mediterranean-like summers but colder winters than the true Mediterranean zone. This gives it a cold hardiness that true Mediterranean plants sometimes lack, handling temperatures down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit in its coldest adapted forms while retaining full tolerance for summer drought, alkaline soils, and intense heat. For the North San Diego foothills at 1,300 feet, this combination of Mediterranean drought tolerance and genuine cold hardiness is uniquely valuable because you need both. The jujube fruit is one of the great underappreciated fruits in the American gardening world. Eaten fresh when it has just changed from green to a mottled red-green color, it tastes like a crisp sweet apple with a slightly floral note that is entirely its own. Left on the tree to ripen fully to deep red, or allowed to dry naturally on the branch, it transitions into something completely different, a sweet, dense, chewy fruit that tastes like a date crossed with an apple. with a concentrated richness that makes it one of the most satisfying dried fruits available from any backyard garden plant. Lee and Honey Jar are the best varieties for North San Diego foothill gardens. Lee produces large round fruit with exceptional fresh-eating quality and ripens reliably in the long foothill summer. Honey Jar produces smaller, exceptionally sweet fruit that is outstanding both fresh and dried and ripens slightly earlier than Lee, extending the harvest window when both are planted together. Both varieties are partially self-fertile, but produce significantly more heavily with a cross-pollination partner nearby. A mature jujube in a North San Diego foothill garden needs deep but infrequent watering in summer, tolerates alkaline soils without any amendment, handles Santa Ana wind events without stress, and produces 40 to 60 pounds of fruit per year at peak production from a single tree. Number 5 is the prickly pear cactus, Opuntia ficus indica, and I anticipate the same reaction here that comes up every time a cactus is mentioned in a food gardening context. This is not a garden plant. This is a wild plant. But the prickly pear is one of the most productive food plants that can be grown in a North San Diego foothill garden, and it is native to the semi-arid regions of Mexico and the American Southwest in conditions that are climatically similar to the inland California foothill zone. In Southern California and Baja California, it grows wild on rocky slopes and dry hillsides throughout the region, producing abundantly with zero human care in the exact conditions that characterize your garden. The food value of the prickly pear comes from two completely different sources. The pads, which are the flat, fleshy stem segments that most people think of as the cactus itself, are eaten as a vegetable called nopals throughout Mexican and Mexican-American cuisine. Young tender pads harvested in spring are sliced and cooked like green beans or used raw in salads, with a flavor that is mildly tart and slightly mucilaginous in a way that is entirely pleasant when combined with other ingredients. And the fruit, which is the bright red, orange, or yellow pear-shaped structure that develops on the edges of the mature pads in late summer, is one of the most beautiful and refreshing fruits available from any plant in the Southern California landscape. Sweet, mildly floral, deeply colored, and eaten either fresh or processed into juice, syrup, jelly, and candy. The spineless varieties of Opuntia ficus indica, developed over centuries of cultivation in Mexico, produce pads and fruit without the glochids and spines that make wild cactus handling so unpleasant. Plant a spineless variety in your driest, most sun-exposed rocky position where nothing else will establish. Give it no irrigation after the first summer. Give it no care whatsoever, and it will produce pads for harvest in spring and fruit for harvest in late summer and autumn, year after year, indefinitely, from soil and a growing position that contributes nothing to any other food-producing plant in your garden. Number 6 is the loquat, Areobotria japonica. And this is the fruit that surprises most North San Diego foothill gardeners, who have been told their climate is too cold for subtropical fruits. Because the loquat is not a true subtropical plant in the sense that mangoes and papayas are subtropical, it is a cool subtropical plant from the mountainous regions of central China that handles light frost easily, handles moderate drought once established, and produces its fruit in late winter and early spring when almost nothing else in the foothill garden is producing fresh food. A mature loquat at 1,300 feet in a sheltered position in North San Diego County will handle the temperatures your winters deliver without any protection and will reward you with clusters of orange, sweet, mildly tart fruit in March and April that taste like an apricot crossed with a peach, and that ripen at a time of year when grocery store prices for fresh fruit are at their annual peak. The loquat handles the hot, dry North San Diego foothill summer in dormancy, meaning it essentially shuts down active growth during the season, that stresses other plants most severely, and concentrates its energy into flower and fruit production during the cool season when water stress is minimal. This inverted seasonal cycle makes it one of the most water-efficient fruit plants in the foothill garden, because its highest demand period for moisture, when it is actively flowering and fruiting, coincides with the winter rainy season, when your garden receives its natural rainfall. Varieties like Champagne and Gold Nugget produce the largest and best flavored fruit for Southern California conditions. Plant in a position with good air drainage to reduce frost damage to the flowers, which emerge in late autumn and can be damaged by the hardest frosts the foothill zone delivers. Number 7 is the feijoa, or pineapple guava, Acacelloiana, which I have now covered in 3 consecutive climate scripts because its adaptability genuinely spans an extraordinary range of growing conditions. But the North San Diego foothill climate is arguably its single best performance environment in the continental United States, because here it receives both the summer heat it needs for fruit development and the mild winter cool it needs to break dormancy and set a heavy flower crop. In coastal Southern California, where temperatures are too mild, feijoa often fails to break dormancy properly and produces a disappointing flower set. In the inland foothill zone, at 1,300 feet, the winter temperatures drop reliably enough to provide adequate chilling hours, and the summer heat pushes the fruit to full sweetness and large size. The feijoa handles the alkaline, rocky, fast-draining soils of the North San Diego foothills without significant amendment. It handles the dry summer, with deep but infrequent irrigation once established. It handles the Santa Ana winds with its dense, leathery, silver-backed foliage that loses minimal moisture even in extremely low humidity conditions. And it handles the January frosts at foothill elevation without any damage because it is cold-hardy to about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The flowers in late spring are large, dramatic and edible, with thick white petals surrounding vivid red stamens that taste sweet and tropical. And hummingbirds are so attracted to them that a feijoa in full bloom in a North San Diego foothill garden becomes a wildlife spectacle as much as a food plant. Plant 2 different varieties together for cross-pollination. Apollo and Gemini are the classic California pairing. 2 established feijoa bushes in a foothill garden will produce 20 to 30 pounds of their extraordinary pineapple strawberry guava fruit every autumn for decades. Number 8 is the Chilean guava, Moline, which I covered in the coastal script as a cool, damp climate specialist, but which actually has a second expression at foothill elevation in North San Diego County that is worth discussing separately. At 1,300 feet, the North San Diego foothill garden gets enough winter cool to satisfy the Chilean guava's requirement for dormancy and flower set, enough summer heat to ripen the fruit to full sweetness, and enough variation between the 2 seasons to push the plant toward heavy annual production in a way that the more uniformly mild coastal climate cannot always achieve. The key is siting. In a coastal garden, the Chilean guava can go almost anywhere. In a foothill garden, it needs a sheltered position that protects the flowers and developing fruit from the hardest January frosts, ideally against a south or west-facing wall or fence that provides reflected warmth during cold nights. In this position, the Chilean guava produces its small, intensely flavored, wild strawberry passion fruit berries reliably every autumn and provides one of the most unusual and rewarding fruit experiences available from any plant in the foothill garden. Number 9 is the strawberry tree, Arbutus unado, and this is one of the most underplanted fruit-producing shrubs in the entire California garden, despite the fact that it is so perfectly suited to the Southern California climate that it is commonly used as a landscape ornamental throughout the region. The strawberry tree is native to the Mediterranean basin and the Atlantic coast of Europe, growing wild in the dry, rocky, alkaline-influenced soils of the Mediterranean scrublands in conditions that are climatically very similar to the North San Diego foothills. It handles drought with complete equanimity once established. It handles alkaline soils without any amendment. It handles the temperature range of the foothill zone, from summer highs above 100 degrees Fahrenheit to winter lows in the upper 20s, without any stress. And it flowers and fruits simultaneously, producing clusters of small, round, strawberry-like fruits in red and yellow at the same time as it produces its white bell-shaped flowers, creating one of the most visually beautiful food plants in the temperate garden. The fruit of the strawberry tree is not a fruit that most people immediately love. It is mildly sweet, slightly grainy in texture, and has a complexity that requires some acquaintance before it reveals its qualities. Eaten fully ripe, when the fruit has turned deep red and softened slightly, it is genuinely pleasant with a flavor that combines elements of fig, pear, and lychee. But its greatest value in the North San Diego foothill garden is as a preserving fruit. Strawberry tree jam and strawberry tree liqueur, the famous Portuguese Madrono spirit, are outstanding products that reward the modest effort of harvesting and processing this reliable and beautiful fruit. A mature strawberry tree in a foothill garden needs essentially no irrigation after establishment, no soil amendment, no fertilizing, and no pest or disease management. It simply grows, flowers, and fruits every year indefinitely in the conditions your garden already provides. Number 10 is the elderberry, specifically the blue elderberry Sambucus nigra subspecies Cerulea, which is the native elderberry species of California and the western United States. While the mountain and Georgia scripts discuss the common elderberry and the American elderberry respectively, the blue elderberry is a distinct western subspecies that handles the specific conditions of the inland California foothill zone, with a nativeness that introduced elderberry varieties cannot match. It grows wild throughout the inland foothill regions of Southern California, along creek beds and in canyon bottoms where seasonal moisture is available, and it is one of the most productive native food plants in the California landscape, producing enormous flat-top clusters of small blue-black fruit coated with a powdery silver blue that gives the subspecies its name. The blue elderberry handles the North San Diego foothill climate because it evolved here. It handles the dry summer by entering a semi-dormant state during the hottest and driest months and concentrating its growth and fruiting into the cool season from late winter through early summer. It handles the alkaline soils of the foothill zone better than introduced elderberry varieties because its root system evolved to work with California soil chemistry. And it handles the foothill frost without any damage because it is a deciduous plant that is dormant during the coldest winter nights. For garden cultivation, site the blue elderberry in a position with access to seasonal moisture, ideally in a low-lying area that collects runoff from surrounding ground or along a drainage swale where winter rain concentrates. Give it supplemental irrigation through its first 2 summers to establish the root system, and then reduce watering to once or twice a month through the dry season. A mature blue elderberry in a foothill garden will produce 10 to 15 pounds of fruit per season, with minimal care, and will provide one of the most regionally authentic food experiences available from any plant in the Southern California landscape. Number 11 is the rosemary, Rosmarinus officinalis. And I want to address the obvious objection directly. Rosemary is a herb, not a fruit bush. But in the context of the North San Diego foothill food garden, rosemary belongs on this list not as a culinary herb in the conventional sense, but as a perpetually productive, completely zero maintenance, permanent food-producing plant that provides one of the most economically valuable crops per square foot of any plant you can grow in this climate. Culinary rosemary at any grocery store in Southern California costs between $2 and $4 for a small bundle. A single mature rosemary bush in a North San Diego foothill garden produces the equivalent of hundreds of those grocery store bundles per year from a plant that needs no irrigation, no fertilizing, no pest control, and no care of any kind after the first summer. It grows in your most difficult positions, the driest, the rockiest, the most alkaline, the most exposed to Santa Ana winds, the places where every other plant on this list would struggle during establishment. And it thrives there permanently. Beyond its culinary value, rosemary flowers are one of the most important early-season nectar sources for native bees and honeybees in the Southern California landscape, producing a continuous flush of pale blue flowers from November through April that feeds pollinators during the months when other food sources are scarce. And a garden with well-fed, well-established native bee populations pollinates every other fruit-producing plant on this list more effectively, increasing yields from the pomegranate, the feijoa, the fig, and the loquat in direct proportion to the pollinator activity that your rosemary planting supports. Plant rosemary in every difficult, dry, alkaline position in your foothill garden. Let it grow into large established mounds. Harvest from it constantly, and watch it improve the productivity of everything around it. Number 12 is the toyon, Heteromeles arbutifolia, and this is the most specifically and completely native plant on this entire list, because the toyon is not just native to California. It is native to the chaparral and coastal sage scrub communities of the inland foothill zone of Southern California, growing wild on the rocky hillsides and canyon slopes of North San Diego County itself. Its common name in California is California holly or Christmas berry, and it is the plant that gave Hollywood its name when the hills above Los Angeles were covered with toyon thickets heavy with red berries in winter, which early settlers mistook for English holly. The toyon produces clusters of small, round, bright red berries in November and December that ripen to their full color just as the garden is entering its quietest season, and most other food-producing plants have finished their annual cycle. The berries are edible and have been used as a food source by the Chumash, Tongva, and other California indigenous peoples for thousands of years, traditionally roasted or ground into a flour-like meal that extends the fruit's usefulness beyond the short window of fresh eating. Fresh toyon berries have a slightly bitter, astringent flavor when raw that mellows significantly after light cooking, and they make a distinctive jelly with a tart, complex flavor that is entirely a product of this specific California landscape. But the toyon's greatest value in a North San Diego foothill food garden is ecological. A mature toyon is one of the most important wildlife support plants in the Southern California landscape, providing berries for wintering birds at exactly the time when natural food sources are most scarce, supporting native pollinator populations through its summer flower clusters, and providing dense evergreen cover for beneficial insects and small animals that control the pest species that would otherwise damage your other food plants. A foothill garden with an established toyon is a garden with a functioning ecological support system. And a garden with a functioning ecological support system needs less of everything from you: less pest management, less fertilizer, less intervention. The toyon does not just produce food, it builds the conditions under which your entire food garden produces more reliably. Plant toyon in your driest, most exposed, most difficult positions. It handles full sun, reflected heat from walls and paving, rocky alkaline soils, and complete summer drought with the indifference of a plant that has been handling exactly these conditions for millions of years on the same hillsides where your garden now sits. Give it supplemental water through the first summer only. After that, leave it alone. It will establish, grow, flower, fruit, and support your entire garden ecosystem without asking anything further from you. Now, here is the system's framework that transforms these 12 plants from a collection of individual specimens into a functioning, self-reinforcing, low-maintenance food production system for the North San Diego foothills. The inland foothill garden at 1,300 feet has one primary organizing constraint that does not apply to coastal gardens or Pacific Northwest gardens, which is summer water. Every management decision in a foothill food garden should be evaluated through the lens of water efficiency, because water in a Southern California summer is both the most critical resource and the most expensive one. And the way you build water efficiency into a foothill food system is not by installing more sophisticated irrigation technology. It is by choosing plants that need the least water in the first place, and then siting and grouping them according to their water needs, so that your irrigation infrastructure serves multiple plants efficiently rather than individual plants expensively. Your zero-water plants, the ones that need essentially no supplemental irrigation after the first 2 years, form the structural backbone of the foothill food system. The pomegranate, the olive, the prickly pear, the toyon, the strawberry tree, and the rosemary all belong in this category. These plants go in your most difficult, most water-limited positions: the rocky slopes, the dry banks, the areas far from irrigation infrastructure, the exposed south-facing positions that heat up fastest in summer. Plant them once, water them through their first 2 summers, and then step back. They will manage the rest independently. Your low-water plants, the ones that need deep but infrequent irrigation every 2 to 3 weeks through the dry season, once established, form your primary production layer. The fig, the jujube, the feijoa, the blue elderberry, and the loquat all belong here. These plants go in your best garden positions with access to your primary irrigation system, which you run deeply but infrequently rather than shallowly and frequently. Deep, infrequent watering develops the deep root systems that make these plants progressively more drought tolerant over time. Frequent shallow watering keeps roots near the surface, where they are vulnerable to the summer heat that bakes the top inch of foothill soil to temperatures that can damage shallow roots. Your microclimate plants, the ones that need a specific protected position to succeed at foothill elevation, are the Chilean guava and the loquat, both of which perform best against a south-facing wall or fence that provides frost protection in January and reflected warmth through the cool season. These plants go in your most sheltered garden position, regardless of what that means for irrigation convenience, because getting the microclimate right for these plants matters more than any other management consideration. The result of this water-matched, microclimate-aware, position-specific siting approach is a foothill food garden that operates at a fraction of the water cost of a garden planted with the wrong species in the wrong positions. Not because you have done anything clever with irrigation technology, but because the plants you have chosen are doing most of the water management themselves, with root systems that find moisture deep in the rocky foothill subsoil that your irrigation system never reaches and never needs to. There is a particular kind of discouragement that affects North San Diego foothill gardeners who have been trying to grow the wrong plants for several seasons. It is not the dramatic discouragement of a complete crop failure. It is the slow, expensive, exhausting discouragement of plants that are always almost working. The fig that produces in good years but drops its fruit in dry ones. The blueberry that survives but never truly thrives in the alkaline foothill soil. The apple that needs more winter chill than the foothill zone reliably delivers and produces a disappointing crop every third or fourth year. These plants are not failing dramatically, they are just never completely succeeding. And the ongoing investment of water and amendment and attention that they require to maintain their marginal performance is the cost of asking the wrong plants to perform in a climate they were not designed for. The North San Diego foothill garden that is planted with the 12 plants on this list does not produce this kind of discouragement, because these plants are not almost working. They are working completely, in the specific way that plants work completely, when they are growing in a climate that matches their evolutionary history at every level. The pomegranate in October, loaded with fruit that cracks open on the bush from its own sugar content. The fig in August, producing 2 crops simultaneously on the same plant. The jujube in September, covered in hundreds of sweet, crisp, apple-flavored fruits that dry themselves on the branch if you do not harvest them. The loquat in March, producing clusters of orange fruit when the grocery store charges $8 for a pound of imported stone fruit from Chile. This is not a difficult climate. This is not a too hot, too dry, too alkaline, too frosty, too windy climate. This is a Mediterranean climate, one of the 5 on Earth, one of the most productive food-producing climate zones in the history of human agriculture. The climate that produced the olive, the pomegranate, the fig, the grape, and the almond, the 5 plants on which Mediterranean civilization was built, because these plants produce abundantly here and have always produced abundantly in climates exactly like yours. The San Diego gardener who spends another summer running drip irrigation to keep Pacific Northwest blueberries and Midwest raspberries barely alive in rocky alkaline foothill soil is making a choice. They are choosing the plants they recognize over the plants that belong where they live. The San Diego gardener who plants a pomegranate hedge on the dry south-facing slope, a fig against the hottest wall, a jujube in the rocky bank that nothing else will grow in, a loquat in the sheltered frost-protected corner, and a toyon on the exposed ridge where the Santa Ana winds hit first, is making a different choice. They are choosing to garden in a Mediterranean climate, the way the Mediterranean has been gardened for 10,000 years, with the plants that were made for this light, for this heat, for this drought, for this soil. Your North San Diego garden is not too hot. It is not too dry. It is not too difficult. It just needs the right plants. And now you know which ones they are. The system in one sentence. Choose 0 water and low water Mediterranean plants. Match each one to the position that mirrors its native habitat, and let the North San Diego summer do what the Mediterranean summer has always done, which is turn heat and drought and rocky alkaline soil into some of the most extraordinary fruit on Earth.